and welcome to Sunday Express, where we tackle different topics of public interest every week and have thought-provoking conversations with newsmakers, movers and shakers of the continent. Zita Rangundinonzi Nogutula Shabalala in Dombia Gamshengu Udongala Mavuso. Well, this week I'm standing in for my colleague Lennox Wasara, and I must say it is such a great pleasure to be in your company. Right now on the show, we have one of the most renowned personalities who is also a philosopher, a social entrepreneur, motivational speaker, musician, and community leader, Bishop Joshua Maponga. Well, he is indeed a man who doesn't need introduction, really, but Bishop Maponga has done quite a number of projects to help in the community development, which has led him to work with several big organizations. Well, let me not say anything further because the Bishop is right here with us in the studio. Bishop Maponga, it is such a great pleasure. It is such an honor to have you in the studio with us.
Thank you. Greetings to you and all your viewers. And I send my love and peace and understanding on the continent in general.
I'm sure some of our viewers would love to know who exactly is Bishop Maponga. If you can just kindly tell us about your background, your spirituality, your spiritual journey, and how you define yourself as a bishop or as a Christian, or are you affiliated in any religious group or spiritual group?
In English, there is a word they say present perfect tense, past perfect tense, pluperfect tense. When you get to Greek, of course, you learn about aorist 1, aorist 2, aorist 3. And this whole thing of who are you, it presents you in the perfect tense. Whereas there's also an element of grammar called the participle. The participle is a verb that has its starting and continues into the future. Hence, it's not I see, I am seeing. It's not I play, I am playing. And therefore, when you ask me who are you, you're asking me in the present perfect tense because you want to put me there and say, I say I am being, meaning to say I am in the participle mode. I could have been that yesterday. I could be this tomorrow. I could be that the following day. And there's no controversy in terms of that. For that's what life is all about. Nature around us, summer, autumn, winter, spring. Seasons are changing. Therefore, to ask me who am I and to define myself in my bishopry or in my academic proliferation space, which happened in the 90s, and you're looking at me 20 years later, 25 years later, 30 years later, and ask me, who are you? And I would be a fool to tell you that I'm a theologian, because I've not only explored theology to date, though academically on the wall, I am that. Therefore, life to me is not about who are you. The real question must be, who are you becoming?
So what do you prefer people addressing you as, Mr. Maponga or Pastor Maponga?
I'd never went to Britain and the Queen never put a stick on my shoulder to make me a mister or to make me a sir.
Baba Maponga?
Those are better names. Yeah, I'm 53 years old now, so in your culture, when you meet an old man at 53 years old, what do you call them?
Definitely
And
Baba
again,
Maponga.
deliberately, the issue of titles is one of the biggest mess in Africa. Because when people have titles, they don't tend to behave and dictate in a certain way. All of a sudden, a doctor walks into the room and people get confused. He's the one who must now, and yet this doctor is a full coconut, brown outside, white on the inside. So the whole idea of giving each other titles, and then we lock ourselves in those titles as if you cannot think, you cannot live beyond the stupid little title that they give you. You are a sister, you will be a wife one day, you are a colleague, you are an aunt, you are a cousin, you are a niece, you are a what? How many are you? Life is dynamic. You only don't remember as a man, you don't father, you don't husband your children and then father your wife. You need to know how you deal with each relationship in its own dynamic. Therefore, I cannot say you are an aunt, Dulamo. You are nothing else. There's nothing like that. I change my clothes from being an aunt to being a wife, to being a sister, to being a CEO, to being a... So there's no dichotomy. The whole issue of trying to ask people, who are you? That question on its own already tells me of the line of thinking you're coming from, which is a colonial Hellenistic mindset, which want to put me in a box and then lock me up and say, Murut does not behave like this. You know, oh, a teacher does this. Oh, you're a lawyer. And immediately you memorize people. You lose the essence of the dynamics in the multilateral, dimensional, metrical expression of who people really are. So I'm nothing. I'm just being. learning, I'm growing, I'm becoming.
There's this question I've been wanting to ask you. There's this spiritual group from Israel in Dimona. They sort of believe in African cultural spirituality. What's your are you affiliated in that dogma?
I happen to have lived in Dimona myself,
Oh,
in Israel.
wonderful.
I met up the Hebrew Israelites who are there at the collapse, I think around 1966, thereabouts, when the black Americans or the black Africans who are in America wanted to come back under the speeches of Marcus Garvey and the rest of them. Then they moved over into Liberia. Some of them died there because of the disease and etc. They proceeded until they ended up in Dimona in Israel. So yes, they have traced their roots and to be identified as Hebrew people, biblically of course, but in terms of their ethnic geographical location, Africa remains, because these went off with the slave trade. So they looked beyond the slave trade. Where were they and who have they become? And they claimed the 12 tribes of Israel, and they've been there. Sir Amadiel, who is one of the leaders there, is a good friend of mine. And yes, the African history must be owned by Africans. You cannot allow the Suez Canal, which is 15 meters wide, to separate Africa from the Middle East, when Madagascar is 1,000 of kilometers away from Africa and it is considered part of Africa. So what am I missing here? We are on the same, you dug a canal a few days ago. And by the way, if you have the Middle East, where is the Middle North? Where is the Middle South?
Sure.
And where is the Middle West? So this whole concept of middle what? These are political names we find in our modern political maps, but they are neither geographical, historical, ethnographical, or African at all.
Very interesting. Before we go any further, I would like us to quickly go to an ad break.
On JIT-TV, the news never stop.
The previous finance minister had projected that economic growth in Zimbabwe will be around 3.7%.
The Zim dollar, as things stand, is basically your bond notes. With complete coverage, local stories.
As President of the Republic of Zimbabwe,
Zimbabwe made its first 1 million compensation payment as part of an agreement.
We are strong people. That's why we are called Zimbabweans. We are very strong people.
At the conference today, they gave the virus a name, COVID-19, coronavirus disease.
Who else? And get a scoop of what's happening around the world.
In our business and investment report today,
Stay in the know with current affairs on JIT-TV News. Weekdays at 7:30 on JIT-TV. Just in time.
well, thank you for joining us again. We are still sitting here with Obaba Joshua Maponga. But Maponga, please tell us about the Farmers of Thought series. If you can just delve on that a bit, just give us a brief information what that is all about. What's the inspiration behind it?
The science we use for building Farmers of Thought is what we call behavior modification.
Yes.
When you use concrete illustrations to extrapolate mental framework or ideology. Therefore, I use farming as a concept. But within farming, what are the elements that consist of farming? It's ownership of land, it's digging of the land, it's cultivation of the land, it's plowing on the land, it's feeding on the land, and ultimately having your income coming out of the land. Then you take that idea as is, then move it into the mental framework and say, in what way can we be farming? What quality of soil? Mindset. What quality of seed? Information. When do we prune bad habits and getting rid of them? What do we harvest? Output, projects, and etc. So you pick up a concrete idea, then you move the idea into a philosophical space, then create what we now call farmers of thought,
Yes.
which basically looks at the three farms. The first farm, which is the farm of the mind, the quality of seed that is there. The next farm, which is your reproduction, the quality of seed, and the quality of people who are plowing in your field, and ultimately the quality of soil that we have. And then you can never give people land above their, you can never give people land beneath their feet if they don't own the land between their legs and they own the land between their ears. So farmers of thought is an institution basically involved into changing the mindset so that the hardware can behave. Because when the face is beautiful and the hardware is not working, when the face is beautiful and the software is not working, the hardware suffers. So ultimately, we are looking at this as a thinking tool for the modern generation. How do you begin to process thoughts as you are making your moral and ethical decisions in life? So yes, it's an institute that I established. I'm the founder and the CEO of that organization, and we look at Africa and every black child as our target market.
I understand that at some period in your life, you used to be one of the leaders of the Seventh Adventist Church. Are there any members of that church that maybe are following you through this path that you're in right now?
Influence and growth is quite exciting. My inboxes are full of church members, both within the Adventist Church and the Pentecostal community and mainstream churches. The Pan-American audience, our brothers and sisters in Europe, who are all connected to the the umbilical cord of human civilization, and they are looking for their cultural perspectives. So in as much as people are Christian, for example, and then you become Adventist, those are secondary definitions of who you are. And any member of the Seventh Adventist Church who immediately begins to look over their shoulder to see where they are coming from, particularly in your generation, you will not do that while you're ignoring me, because that is the path that I have actually couched, that we cannot only be Christian, which is a Eurocentric ideology, and yet we cannot relate to ourselves as Africans. Does God have a problem with the African? And if he does, then we need to find another God.
Going back again to the books that you've written before, there's this particular character, Al-Kebulan, that you spoke about in one of your books. I understand it's a woman that bled for 400 years. Her story is quite similar to the story of the woman of the Bible that touched Jesus' cloth and she was healed. Is there any relation between the two stories?
Thinking is for free, and illustrations of growth, some of them are embedded into what I might call classic literature or sacred literature, including the Bible onto that list. So when you read these storylines that are found in the text, David fighting Goliath, for example, the question is, where are you in your life? Who is your Goliath? What is your ammunition? How do you position yourself to win the battle against Goliath? Then you use the storyline as an illustration to actually apply in your personal life, so that David and Goliath does not remain as a picture that is hanging in the Bible, yet in your own personal life you cannot relate to the dynamics of the whole story. So when I look at the African narrative in its totality, and in my writing of the Gospel according to Maponga J, which is actually a feminine book, which I'm calling my own Bible. I'm writing my own Bible. And in that book, I want to encapsulate the feminine gender as the source of life itself. And then Al-Kebulan, who is the ancient word for Africa, Afrika, the mother of mankind, where also Nubia, people of skin color that is deep, Ethiopia and Sudan, or in some certain cases even Egyptians, are used as a name that is actually identifying with the Africans. But on all those names, I decided to extract Al-Kebulan for its definition. It is a pro-Hebraic Arabic influence, but Al-Kebulan becomes the mother of nations. So I'm writing a letter to Al-Kebulan, and I'm writing a letter to this beautiful woman whom I call the African continent. And I want you to look at herself, admire herself. I want you to look at her resources. I want you to look at her children. I want you to look at her rivers. I want you to look at her mountains, her bosom, and so it's quite an interesting piece of writing where there's lots of imagery which actually depicts the African political, social, economic science as a woman. And issues of prostitution, for example, are mentioned in there. Again, economically, who is Africa prostituting herself with? the issues of bearing children, production, reproduction. So I'm looking at a philosophical interrogation to rewrite actually this African narrative in its religious, social, Christian, Judeo space, sort of thing, if I can position it in terms of the classification of the literature.
So you mentioned that you are writing your own Bible. So let's say maybe some of our viewers are interested at following the same path that you're on. Maybe they want to be mentored. Maybe they want to learn more about your beliefs. Do you have maybe a temple where you gather with your followers? A certain place? Are you opening a temple? I won't say a church.
For a start, I'll say you can't change the hardware when the software is not yet responded. So I opted initially to start up with an African diaspora, vigorous African awareness campaign, which I placed on social media. And many of my friends who are proliferated walk up to me and say, "How I'm fit? Why are you wasting your time on Facebook? Hey, you must come to Twitter, you must come to Instagram, up here where the real people are."
Yeah, they call
But
it
then
the
I discovered,
village.
no, my people are everywhere. And there's no reason why I cannot start up a learning, academic, educational campaign, firstly for the African to know themselves, before we can move over into platforms of setting up infrastructures, buildings, temples, sanctuaries, whatever we might want to call them. But for a start, I'm very active on all social media platforms. I've put up thousands of content on your YouTube channels. And yes, it is a learning platform. And I always say in my philosophical space, don't try to memorize my words, learn my ways, and my words will come to you. Therefore, you don't need to learn much of what is outside you, more than you must activate what you already have as information that is inside you. And the first place of study is yourself. And when you pick up the Bible, as long as the African remains the subject if he does not become the subject of the study, he always remains as an object of abuse. So we want to reposition the African spirituality and its function within and containing and encouraging that let us make ourselves the real subject of this conversation. Because if the Black Book has its authenticity on the African continent, then why is the African not owning the biblical narrative as his own narrative, as his own story?
Well, we've been having such an interesting talk so far, but unfortunately we have to quickly go to an ad break. Please do stay with us.
In a world of commerce and ever-evolving industries, we venture into the minds of those that run these big companies. On this show, we take you into the human stories of the giants with the vision, their big ideas, and where all this inspiration.
Today, I have the pleasure of introducing to you Mr. Pedro.
My story began 1974 in Princess Marina Hospital in Gaborone, where I was born. So I was born, I'm a Gaborone guy, I was born here.
Welcome back to Sunday Express Show. We are still sitting here with Ubaba Joshua Maponga as we were still talking about followers and members. I understand that you have a political party in Zimbabwe. What's the name of the organization and how is that going so far?
We have repositioned ourselves not only to begin to address political issues, but we wanted rather to be a movement for cultural integration in the country. We have 16 tribes in the country. And the whole idea of Zimbabwe indigenous movement is to identify the royal houses, identify the cultural leaders, reinstitute an African cultural Zimbabwean calendar, and celebrate our culture as a country in totality. Having lived in South Africa for quite some time now, there is an element of South Africa, which I'm taking with me back to Zimbabwe, and that is the celebration of culture. So you find that our station is only made up of Shona and Ndebele. We have Kalangas in Zimbabwe. We have Vendas in Zimbabwe. We have Nambias. We have Tongas. We have Manyikas. We have, and all these Baremba tribes, which are almost similar to the Venda tribes, are not known in the public space. So the issue for me for this movement, rather than a political party, was to find a meeting place where we can influence political organizations to also look at cultural perspectives.
About the media, how do you feel about the way they've portrayed you? Do you think they've portrayed you genuinely correctly so, or do you think they haven't really showed us the real Obabu Joshua Maponga?
Yeah, we have had our sweet and sour relationships. I mean, I went through a big media riffraff some few months ago, and information that is unqualified, and people just having a hobby and having a fun time on someone's character. That's what sells newspapers. That's what sells media and stuff like that. And we ended up in courts and people beginning to apologize and retract. But bad news always travel faster than the good news itself. But as far as media is concerned, I think you have limited yourselves as media people, because you come to me and say, what do you say about religion? What do you say about this? So you only come, you pick what you want, and you forfeit the entire framework of where I'm working from and what are the other things that I do. You may never know that I'm a musician, I'm a writer, I'm a sculptor, I'm a painter, and a dozen of other things that I do outside of what the media would want to see. So the window through media has been quite a pigeonhole into the entire frame of what my life is made out of.
Talking about the music, I understand you play quite a number of African instruments. How many instruments do you play, and what brought out the love
I don't
of
know how
music?
many I play. All I know is that every time there's an instrument that talks to me and wants to come close to me, it does that.
Who taught you?
Actually, the only man who taught me a music instrument was Ubra B, Banzi Bangani, but he taught me a trumpet, the same one who taught Brayu Masekela.
Oh, nice.
But I used to drive from Swaziland to Springs here. He shows me some tricks and stuff, and then I go back home. George Murray, when I was in Durban, I thought I would become a classical music player, and playing this orchestra kind of trumpet. But as life has it, I ended up saying, if I can play Western instruments, why am I not playing also local African instruments? So I went on a journey of African collections, the mbiras, the kuduhons, the nyatitis, the banduras, and various other instruments, and drums, congas, and the works, and of course the most favorite of them all being mbira.
Oh, so this
that's a kuduhon
so
right
this
there.
one is mbira.
This is mbira.
And that's a horn.
This is a horn.
It's just
This is
a horn.
Yeah. One manda in Shona.
If I wanted to learn how to play these instruments, would you teach me? How long would it take for me to learn how to
The first
play
thing you must
these
know is that
instruments?
music, you don't learn music. Music you play.
Yes.
Therefore, you just need an attitude of play. Because once you start learning, like you want to concentrate, so you lose it.
Yeah.
Because this is a spiritual instrument that you need to move into rather, and it takes your time, and until the spirit of the mbira, visits you.
I love it. Please play something for us and our viewers.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was amazing.
Somewhere
That
there,
was
somewhere
beautiful.
there.
That was
Yeah.
beautiful.
I was going away. You needed to put some ropes and pull
It's
it back
hypnotizing. It's a hypnotizing feeling
in.
indeed.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for our Sunday Express show for tonight. Please do join us again next week, same time. Thank you so much, Bob Maponga, for your time.
First class. Don't do what I won't do, but if you do it better.
Well, see you again next week. I'm Noguthula Shabalala Intogazi Yagwamshengu Utongala Mavuso. Cheers.
Zimbabwe, nyika yakanaka. Zimbabwe is a landlocked country between the Zambezi and Limpopo rivers, surrounded by SADC countries like South Africa, Botswana, Zambia, and Mozambique. The name Zimbabwe stems from a Shona term for Great Zimbabwe. It's the ruins of an ancient city dating back to between the 11th and 15th centuries, are made entirely of stone and span over 1,800 acres. Ask us about arranging a visit here. The highlands are known for their natural environment, with tourist destinations such as Nyanga, Chimanimane, Vumba, and Chirinda Forest at Mount Selinda. Victoria Falls, one of the 7 wonders and one of the world's biggest and most spectacular waterfalls, is located in the country's extreme northwest and is part of the Zambezi River. The Victoria Falls National Park is also in this area and is one of the 8 main national parks in Zimbabwe, the largest of which is Hwange National Park. Matobo Hills National Park is one of the country's most interesting parks from a cultural perspective. It's not only very scenic, it also has a rich human history. Once inhabited by Bushmen, there's a superb collection of well-preserved rock art dating back at least 13,000 years. Lake Kariba is one of the biggest man lakes that is famous for the mystical creature Nyami Nyami and is a popular African travel destination. Zimbabwe is showing a steady growth path economically according to the World Bank review. This is a significant improvement after a 2-year recession due to COVID-19 and other factors.